By late 1944, the battlefield in Western Europe was no longer just a contest of tanks and artillery. It had become a test of judgment, patience, and leadership under pressure. In the hours before dawn, when darkness had not yet fully lifted, the low growl of diesel engines hung in the air. Along narrow French country roads, M4 Sherman tanks stood in long columns, steel tracks pressed into wet earth. Crews waited beneath closed hatches, silent, listening to radio static and the distant, hollow echoes of artillery somewhere beyond the horizon. For General George S. Patton, this was the moment war was meant for. To him, grinding forward inch by inch made no sense. His thinking was direct and dangerous. Speed was survival. If armored divisions were given freedom of movement, German lines could collapse entirely. Patton viewed armored warfare as a blade, fast, sharp, and decisive. Every hour spent hesitating, every pause to consolidate, gave the enemy time to breathe, regroup, and recover. But this war was not being fought on one level alone. Behind the front lines, another battlefield existed, one of logistics, alliances, and strategic balance. Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, stood before maps that showed more than arrows in front lines. He saw fuel tonnage, port capacity, exhausted infantry divisions, and fragile political alliances. British caution, American aggression, and French political pressure all converged at a single command table. Armored warfare could not be won by tanks alone. Every Sherman depended on fuel convoys, maintenance crews, infantry screens, and artillery coordination. Break one link and even the fastest advance could become a death trap. Eisenhower understood this reality. To him, war was a machine, and machines pushed too hard eventually destroy themselves. In that tension, the future of the Allied campaign hung suspended. Speed versus control, the blade versus the machine, and the decisions being made now would shape not only maps but the lives of every soldier fighting on the ground. The conflict between Patton and Eisenhower was not personal, it was doctrinal. Patton believed armored divisions were an independent force. Panthers and Tigers, in his view, could be defeated through relentless speed and constant pressure. His experience in North Africa and Sicily had proven that enemies denied time to react often collapsed outright. His plan was clear: bypass resistance, penetrate deep, and shatter German rear areas, rail lines, fuel depots, and command centers. Eisenhower saw a different picture. Every advance carried a cost. Every mile gained stretched supply lines thinner. The German army might have been retreating, but it was far from destroyed. Disciplined panzer divisions remained. 88mm anti-tank guns still dominated key terrain. Interior lines of communication allowed German units to shift and respond faster than expected. They did not need victory. Delay alone could be decisive. German commanders exploited this reality. Every demolished bridge slowed fuel deliveries. Every ambushed convoy weakened momentum. Every immobilized Sherman became a strategic liability. Allied armor had numerical superiority, but without coordination, numbers meant little. This was why Eisenhower insisted on a broad front advance. It appeared slow, even cautious, but it ensured that infantry, artillery, engineers, and armor moved together. Combined arms warfare, each element supporting the others, became the foundation of the campaign. It lacked spectacle, but it was sustainable. Patton saw this as hesitation. He believed history remembered generals who took risks. Eisenhower remembered the funerals that followed failed ones. Every wrong decision could cost thousands of lives. Leadership reached its hardest test here, where there was no clear right or wrong, only choices that carried different forms of loss. For the soldiers on the ground, doctrinal debates meant little. Survival meant everything. Sherman crews knew their tanks were vulnerable in frontal engagements against Tigers. They adapted. Flanking maneuvers, infantry coordination, artillery smoke, and precision timing became essential. Inferior equipment was balanced through superior tactics. Combined arms operations proved their value. Infantry cleared anti-tank teams, engineers removed mines under fire, artillery suppressed enemy positions. Only then did armor advance. The process was slower, but it worked. Every mile gained was paid for in exhaustion, improvisation, and blood. German forces adapted as well. Even in retreat, they remained disciplined. Rearguard actions, ambushes, and localized counterattacks aimed to disrupt Allied tempo. But each delay consumed irreplaceable resources. Fuel shortages worsened, experienced crews were lost. Allied air superiority tightened its grip. Leadership decisions now translated directly into casualties. When advances were coordinated, losses decreased. When impatience took over, ambushes multiplied. Eisenhower's restraint may have frustrated commanders, but it preserved lives. At this point, leadership stopped being about boldness and became about responsibility. Pressure on Allied command intensified. Politicians demanded speed. The press predicted imminent victory. Field commanders pushed for greater freedom of action. Patton's argument was simple: strike now or lose the moment. Montgomery remained deliberate and methodical. Eisenhower stood between them. Coalition warfare complicated everything. Each nation carried its own priorities. Eisenhower was not only fighting Germany, he was holding the alliance together. Grant too much freedom to one commander, and unity risked collapse. Again and again, Eisenhower said no, when others demanded yes. This was leadership at its most difficult, choosing the unpopular path because it was necessary. The result was irreversible momentum. Pressure applied across the entire front denied Germany the ability to recover. When the breakthrough finally came, it was not a gamble, it was collapse. By the time Allied forces approached the Rhine, the outcome was clear. German units could still fight tactically, but they were strategically finished. Logistics had failed, trained crews were gone. Allied coordination had become an unstoppable system. Victory did not arrive through a single dramatic charge. It came through discipline, doctrine, and leadership. Patton provided aggression. Eisenhower provided structure. The central lesson of the campaign was unmistakable. Inferior equipment, when used with proper training, coordination, and doctrine, can defeat technically superior forces. Leadership is not only about winning, it is about preserving the men who fight. On the armored battlefields of World War II, steel and firepower dominate the eye. Beneath them, decisions win wars. Decisions made under pressure. Decisions that account for human cost. History does not remember tanks alone. It remembers the leaders who knew when to push and when to hold back, so that when the final advance came, nothing could stop it.